Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Friday, everyone. Can you all hear me? Here we go into a wonderful weekend. Fred is coming up the coast and all kinds of crazy things are happening. Welcome to Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is all about celebrating. It's about celebrating life. It's about celebrating art. It's about celebrating artists. You know, there's a lot to celebrate if we all take the time to do so. I mean, there's a page, it's one of my favorite pages to go to every morning, and it's called Check a Day. You can all check it out. And each day I go to see what can I celebrate today? And there are several things that popped up today. First of all, today is International Medical Transporters Day. And this is something that we should be celebrating every day. Our medical transporters have truly been put to the test over the last year and a half. So let's take a pause to thank all of them for the work that they are doing, not only today, but every day over the past year and a half. And let's pray and hope that they will all be kept very, very safe. Today is also National Male Groomers Day. So all of our male friends that are going to barbers and salons, tip them well. They are working out there. They are also at the front of the line trying to keep you looking beautiful and safe. Today is also one of my favorite holidays, National Bacon Day. It is also, he's giving me a thumbs up, National Reverend Steve Pieters Day. And I am so thrilled that you are here today as I've been reading up on your story, and we're going to talk and tell your story so much because there's a lot to celebrate right now. First of all, there is a major motion picture that is going to be opening next month, which is worth celebrating. It's based on a documentary, one of my favorites, by the way, called The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Tammy Faye Bakker. For those of you who I'm sure remember, big icon in the 80s through the PTO Club. I actually watched the PTL Club. I lived with a woman named Lydia DeVito, and she began every single day with the PTL Club, believe it or not. And so I watched Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker every morning. We're going to talk all about that in a few moments. But Steve Pieters, Reverend Steve Pieters, was actually on that show. And we're going to talk about all of that. But before we delve into your past, I want to ask you, first of all, how are you doing really in the midst of everything that's going on in the world right now?
I'm doing surprisingly well. I mean, you know, when COVID started, I was really scared as a long-term survivor of AIDS, and with all my underlying conditions, I was really nervous. And I had friends with the same underlying conditions who caught it and died. And so I'm really happy to be here and to be as healthy as I am today. It's a lot to celebrate right there.
Well, speaking of celebrations, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
If I'm not mistaken, August 2nd was your birthday.
That's right.
And we really should celebrate because back in the early 80s, you were one of the first people around diagnosed with AIDS, and you were given a very short life sentence.
Right. In 1982, I was diagnosed with GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency, what they were calling AIDS back then. And I was very sick over the next few years and was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma and Kaposi sarcoma and full-blown AIDS in April of '84. And that's when a nurse told me, who'd read my chart, that I had 8 months left to live. Wouldn't live to see 1985. So I was supposed to die before I turned 33 even. And here I am at 69.
Oh, good for you. Well, one of the things that I loved reading about you was that you said you beat it with prayer, positivity, music,
yes,
and a little fairy dust. And
here I am. Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad you have the first interviewer I've ever talked to who actually has a fairy wand as well.
And not only do I have a fairy wand, but I have my own pair of ruby slippers.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Oh my God, that's great. I love it.
And and I was on your Facebook page, and your cover image is from the Disney version of Peter Pan.
Yes.
But I am also friends with the original Tiger Lily, Sandra Lily,
yes,
who was Tiger Lily with Mary Martin's Peter Pan.
My God, how wonderful!
So you see, fairy dust surrounds me.
Yes, indeed. That's great. I love it. Peter Pan was so important to me when I was growing up. Still is important to me. I love Peter Pan. And, Peter teaches us that fairies are born whenever a baby laughs for the first time. That's where we come from, us fairies. And then when the child grows old enough to say, I don't believe in fairies anymore, there's a fairy that drops down dead. Mm-hmm. And of course, in the musical, in the play Peter Pan with Mary Martin and Sandra Lee, there comes a moment where Tinkerbell, Peter's little fairy, is dying because she drank the poison that Captain Hook left for Peter. And Peter turns to the audience and says, Tink is dying because people don't believe in fairies. If you believe in fairies, clap your hands and bring Tinkerbell back to life. And of course, for over a century now, people have applauded like crazy and brought Tinkerbell back to life. And that was something that I talked about in almost every talk I gave in the 80s and 90s, that how important it was when so many good fairies were dying, that we believe in fairies, that we believe in ourselves and each other enough to do the work of healing.
Now, I know that you're from Andover, Massachusetts.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to go back. And people who watched my shows know that I always go back to the 5-year-old self, because to me, the 5-year-old self is the purest self. That's when you start school, for the most part, kindergarten or first grade. You start school, and that's before the peer pressure starts getting layered on. Yeah. When you start becoming what your friends want you to be, what teachers think you should be or should not be. Take us back to the 5-year-old Steve growing up in Andover, Massachusetts. Well, what your life was like at that time.
At 5 years old, I was called Stevie. And little Stevie at 5 years old, I did start kindergarten that year, and I went through kindergarten, and my dad was the chairman of the math department and varsity wrestling coach at Phillips Academy, Andover, the big prep school for all boys at that time. And he would take me to the wrestling meets at the age of 5, and if the boys didn't come in under the weight that they were supposed to wrestle at, he would have them gradually stripped down until they did come in under the weight. And so I oftentimes at 5 had these gorgeous young men with bodies that stripped down naked in front of me. And I thought that was just wonderful. There was a charge about that I didn't really understand, but I knew was different. And I learned very quickly was not something I should talk about, because my father shamed me about that. I don't think he intended to, but he did. and he tisk, and we don't talk about that.
Was
And
it something you said, or was it just?
oh, I probably said something like, "Oh my God, how did they get so muscular?" Uh, and oh my God, they're so big. And Dad was quick to hush me on that.
Well, I had a similar experience. My father was born on January 10th of 1935.
Uh-huh.
And my father was talking one day, and Elvis Presley was born on January 8th of 1935.
Huh.
My father was making a joke, and he said, if the planets had been a little different, you know what that would have meant. And before he could finish his sentence, I blurted out, I would have been Lisa Marie Presley.
Woo!
And my father never brought that up again.
I bet not. That's funny. Great story, Richard.
But it's funny how, even as small children, how our brains begin to function. I remember years ago seeing a segment on 2020 when they were talking about, how little boys and girls' brains begin to function.
Yes.
And I have a photograph of me and my sister at Christmas, and we're both holding dolls. And I don't think that my parents, at that time thought anything of it. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, because we were just so young at the time. But going through this, with your father and your mom, did they try to send you down a different path?
Well, I don't think consciously they did. I think that unconsciously they tried to program me to be the straight boy that, I always knew that my dad wanted me to grow up to be an athlete and as well as a scholar. And he valued that, and I just never was into sports. Oh boy, musicals, yes, but not sports. My dad sat me down in front of the record player and played me the original cast album of South Pacific and My Fair Lady, both of which he'd seen with the original cast, and I loved it. And that I was maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, and I listened to them over and over and over again until I drove my dad and mom crazy and had them absolutely memorized. So, that side of me showed up really early too.
Now, did you grow up in a spiritual household?
Yes. My grandparents my paternal grandparents were missionaries to Korea, Presbyterian missionaries. And my uncle was a Presbyterian pastor, very famous, well-respected Presbyterian pastor, who unfortunately died before he turned 50. And my father was a deacon, and my mother was in charge of the Christian education program. So I went to church every Sunday and Sunday school every Sunday all through my formative childhood years. Yeah. So definitely.
And I remember reading somewhere that you felt, as most people who go into the ministry, that you actually had a calling, that you were called to this life.
Oh, definitely. I first remember feeling like I had a calling when I was about 11 and I was being confirmed into the church. And as we were sitting there after the little ceremony where they confirmed each of us, as I was sitting there in the church, I felt this huge, beautiful, radiant light coming through the church to me. And I just felt, wow, this is something really important I need to pay attention to. And then that summer, we traveled and we went to the Holy Land, and Jerusalem. I saw the old city of Jerusalem, and I was so incredibly moved by that. There was something deep in my soul that really connected me to the spirituality of that experience.
And at what point did you tell your parents that this was the path that you were going to go down?
Oh, well, not until I'd come out and I'd joined the Metropolitan Community Churches. I had every intention of being a Broadway legend, a song and dance.
Okay. So you were going to pursue a career in the theater.
Oh, absolutely. I went to Northwestern and got my undergraduate degree in
Mhm.
acting and musical theater. And then, my path changed. And when I came out, I started going to the MCC, Metropolitan Community Church in Chicago. And it changed my life in every way. And I felt a call to the ministry, and I decided to go to seminary. So I enrolled in McCormick Seminary, which I hadn't realized was the seminary my grandfather went to 75 years previous. And I got my Master's of Divinity there. And while I was in seminary, I figured I had to come out to my parents because I was going to have a ministry in this primarily LGBTQ church. And I was, going to be out and proud as an activist and all of that. So I came out to my parents. It happened to be the day that Anita Bryant appeared on
Well,
Phil
before we get there, if you don't
Yeah,
mind,
sure,
I'd like to go
sure.
back for a moment.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the coming out process was like for you? Because for some people, especially straight people, may not understand what a coming out process is.
Yeah.
What was the coming out process for you?
Well, I developed a drinking problem during college, and right out of college, I didn't do much but drink for the first year or so out of college.
Now, would you associate the drinking with the fact that you were gay?
Oh, it was really wrapped up in that, all this self-hatred and the internalized homophobia. Yes, absolutely. And when I got sober in October of 1975, I realized that if I was going to stay sober, I had to get honest about being gay. And that's when I started attending the Metropolitan Community Church in Chicago. And I met a group of gay and lesbian people who were happy and proud and in loving relationships. And I wanted what they had. So I stuck around. I joined the choir, of course, when I love to sing. And so I always, I just felt the call within a year of being there. And that was it.
And so when you went to your parents and you said, "This is who and what I am," was it a surprise to your parents?
Well, not really.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, when Anita Bryant was on TV that morning on Phil Donahue, she was so hateful and oh my God, and I kept squirming and saying, "Oh, that woman," and stuff like that. And my dad that night at dinner, after we finished dinner, he looked at me and he said, "Steve, do you think that you might be a homosexual?" And I was, yes, I am. And he reached across the table and took my hand and said, "Steve, I love you, and nothing can change that." And my mother cried, but she expressed her love as well. I was scared to death that they were going to kill me in my bed when they found out, but they didn't. And they went on TV with me as I became more and more out, and appeared and told people how proud they were to be the parents of a gay son. And they were really pioneers in the 70s for that.
Well, my belief is that you and I, come from the same generation. I believe that a lot of mothers, believe, it's dreams dashed for them. The grandchildren now, I mean, look at Buttigieg and Chastain now are going to be adopting a child, which I think is wonderful. But that was not part of the picture then. But if you can put in perspective, because I remember dearly, and I also had my own altercation with one of the cronies of Anita Bryant here in New York. Yes. If you can put in perspective for those who don't know or don't remember what that time frame was like with Anita Bryant.
Well, the Stonewall Rebellion in '69 brought a surge of gay and lesbian people out of the closet, and suddenly gay rights ordinances were being passed in different places all over the country.
Still illegal in New York, by the way. Everyone.
It was still illegal in New York, but in Dade County, they passed where Miami is. They passed a gay rights ordinance that gave us equal rights and equal access. And Anita Bryant, who was the orange juice lady, she was a former Miss America or runner-up to Miss America, who was a singer and gospel. She was very popular in Christian broadcasting, and she mounted a campaign against the gay rights ordinance in Miami and Dade County, and they won, actually. But in the process of winning, and then subsequently winning in other places as well, like Wichita, of all places, she galvanized the LGBTQ community in a way that we had not been since Stonewall, really. And another surge of LGBT people came out of the closet. And that was when I came out, was during that period. And oh my God, it was an exciting time to be gay.
Where were you living at the time?
Chicago. Chicago. And there was a very active, large LGBT community in what was then called Newtown, is now called Lakeview. I know the area very well. And were you an activist at all prior to this? No, not at all. Not at all. But I had great role models in Harvey Milk, who was still alive at that point, and in all the activists who fought against Anita Bryant, and Troy Perry, who founded the Metropolitan Community Churches and went on starvation fasts to gain gay rights ordinances. And I mean, there were so many wonderful, prominent gay and lesbian activists at that time. And so I had great role models in being an activist. And I learned from, the pastor of the Good Shepherd Parish MCC in Chicago, Reverend Ken Martin, was an incredible activist. And I learned a lot from him. He was my first mentor in the ministry. And he taught me a lot about being out and proud, and being out and proud in front of the cameras.
Now, after Anita Bryant and you become an activist, I mean, were there any threats on your own life at that time?
Not on my life, but there were certainly threats on LGBT people in general, and many specific threats. And of course, we all know that Dan White killed Harvey Firestein. He narrated the film about Harvey Milk.
Yes.
But Dan White murdered Joe Moscone, the mayor, and Harvey Milk, the city supervisor. And that, again, galvanized the LGBT community. And we all were so grief-stricken by that and horrified that Dan White got off on a sugar defense. And riots happened, not just in San Francisco, but around the country. And so I learned activism through that, as well as through fighting Anita Bryant and John Briggs here in California, and the incredible activism. The murder of Moscone and Milk just served to energize people, I think. It was a scary time in some ways, but I like to say we had the option of being scared to death or scared to life. And I think that a lot of us chose life and activism and action.
Now, interestingly enough, I came to New York in 1979. It was a few years later that I came out.
Where did you come from?
South Carolina.
Oh,
tobacco farm in South Carolina. So, and you've talked about, what that world was like at that time. Just to put things in perspective, and then I'll let you go from there. Because people have been, for the most part, closeted. As I said, even the gay bars in New York, the windows were blacked out. You could not be openly out in New York. And then when Stonewall happened and people were coming out of the shadows, coming out of the closets and living a free lifestyle, it was a party atmosphere.
It really was. Yes.
And if you can tell everyone what that world was like before AIDS, basically.
Before AIDS. Well, before AIDS, it was wild and free. And, I have a lot of young gay men. I'm a member of the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles. And there are a lot of young gay men there who have no idea what it was like back then. Mm-hmm. And when I tell them that the 1970s was a wild and wonderful time to be gay, they look at me like, how could it possibly have been? And yet it was before AIDS, and sex was wild and free. We didn't have to worry about a fatal disease, sexually transmitted disease. If we got a sexually transmitted disease, we went to the Howard Brown Clinic in Chicago and got our shots, and we were fine and went back right out. I mean, I had friends who told me that they had 1,000 sex partners a year. They would go out every night and have 3 or 4 sex partners in the night, and sometimes more. And so it wasn't unusual for gay men, particularly in those days, to have a wild sex life. And it was a lot of fun, believe me.
Well, there's actually a documentary, whether you're straight or gay, I recommend, this documentary called Gay Sex in the 70s.
I love that.
Have you ever seen it? And it really puts things in perspective as to what that world was like pre-AIDS. When did you first become aware of this, of AIDS? And were you really paying attention to it before you found out that you had it yourself?
Well, I didn't pay attention to it in terms of curtailing my own activities, but I read the first report, the first published report in the New York Times. I mean, there was a medical journal first, but then the New York Times reported on it, and then the Advocate, the gay magazine, reported on it, the LGBTQ magazine, I should say, and so I read about it there. I was the pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church in Hartford, Connecticut at that time. And I saw, I took clinical pastoral education at Hartford Hospital. And a friend of mine in 1981 called me and said his best friend and roommate was in the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And would I go visit him? And I did, as a good pastor or chaplain would. And I called on him, and I had known him well, and he was healthy and vibrant, and he wasn't into drugs or alcohol or any of that, and he was into a lot of sex, but he was wasting away. He'd had this strange set of diseases that they couldn't figure out why. They finally diagnosed him with tertiary syphilis and said that's why he was getting so sick. They didn't diagnose him with AIDS until he was gone, and he had died of pneumocystis, but it was at that time just considered a strange pneumonia. And I was beginning to experience symptoms about that time as well. When I discovered thrush on my tongue, candidiasis, and it was a strange white-green coating, cracked coating on my tongue. It really unnerved me, knowing what was going on among gay men. And sure enough, I was diagnosed with gay-related immunodeficiency.
And when you were told that you literally had not a couple of years, but a few months to live. Right. What does that do? I know that you're a spiritual person, and I also know that you had a near-death experience.
Yes.
You can, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, first, the terminal prognosis, I learned to talk about as a life-threatening prognosis. It overwhelmed me at first, and I grieved my life. I grieved my dreams. I had wanted to have a relationship. I'd never had one, and I wanted to have children, and I'd never had any children. And those dreams just died instantly. And I grieved. I gathered friends around me, and I wept, and they cried with me. And finally, I lifted my head up and I looked around and I saw that they were all there with me, and I was so happy to see that. And I felt God's presence, God's love through them. That was just incredible. The pastor of the church, I had moved to Los Angeles, and I was on the staff of the MCC in the Valley in North Hollywood. And the pastor there, Reverend Ken Martin again, who had moved from Chicago to LA, he invited me to preach the Easter sermon 2 weeks later. And I said, "Oh no, you mean I should preach Good Friday? I'm dying." And he said, "No, you need to preach Easter." And looking at what the Easter message meant to me, looking at what my resurrection faith meant was, they told me the worst thing they could possibly tell me, that I'm going to die soon from this horrible stigmatized disease. And because of the resurrection, because of the Easter message, I can still laugh. I can still sing. I can still dance. And I did. I tap danced right in front of the pulpit, and the congregation applauded like crazy. And I could still be fully alive, even in the face of death. And if God is greater than the death of Jesus on the cross, I told them, then God is greater than AIDS. And the congregation gasped like, "Oh, how could you, God greater than AIDS?" But I said, yes, God is greater than AIDS, and God is still in the healing business. And I believed from preaching that sermon, and also from the advice that my very wise doctor told me. She said, AIDS is not going to be 100% fatal. There are going to be some people who survive. If 1 in a million survive AIDS, why not believe that you're going to be that 1 in a million and act accordingly? And so I set out to do the work of healing. There were no medicines available. Doctors would tell us, you in the church have more to offer than we do in the medical world. But I set out to do the work of healing. And I managed to stay alive long enough to defy the 8-month prognosis and live to see 1985. And in 1985, a lot happened. Do you want me to go on and
yes,
talk about that? Okay. Well, in 1985, I was invited to be patient number 1 on the very first antiviral drug they tried against HIV, a drug called Suramin. And I was the first patient on the drug, and within 6 weeks, all of my KS lesions disappeared, and my stage 4 lymphoma went into complete remission. They put 89 other people with AIDS on the drug around the country. And unfortunately, it proved to be extremely toxic. It killed a large percentage of the people who took it. Everybody else died from the progression of HIV and AIDS. I'm one of 2 survivors of the Suramin trials, the now notorious Suramin trials.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Excuse me for interrupting.
No.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on what it was with you that your body was able to accept this?
Well, I'd worked very hard at creating the conditions for medicine to work. I'd taken really good care of myself in those 8 months leading up to 1985. And I'd worked out at the gym. I did everything I could to study nutrition and take good care of myself, and I believed that it was possible that I would live, and that faith really helped. And I did laughter therapy. And my doctor said, if you're going to do that, then do it 3 times a day, like you're taking a pill. And so I watched I Love Lucy and Cheers and MASH and all kinds of other shows of the time that made me laugh. And when you're laughing, you can't be depressed. You can't be scared.
Right.
You know, it's fabulous. And I sang at the top of my lungs. I sang all around the freeways of Los Angeles. I'd put in Judy Garland and Carnegie Hall and sing along with her all through the concert, all the way around the city, you know. and
I'll stay and sing them all night.
Yeah, exactly. We'll sing them all and we'll stay all night. And then a chorus line. I really need this life. Oh God, I need this life. Please, God, I need this life. And you know, it really cheered me. It helped me to do that. Prayer, meditation. I did meditation, guided visualizations. I did body work. I did psychotherapy to help me deal with the things that were blocking me from being fully alive and being fully available for healing. So I did a lot. Now, Richard, I have to say at the same time, Louise Hay, do you know who Louise Hay was?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, Louise Hay would invite me to come speak to her group, her hayride in West Hollywood, because I did what she was trying to help people do and recover from AIDS. This was years later in future years. But I would always say, I worked really hard at it and I really believed that it could happen. But I know a lot of people who worked harder than I did and who believed more that they could live, and they didn't make it.
Right.
So there is an element of grace, of luck, of being in the right place at the right time, having the right genetics. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But Suramin very nearly killed me after it saved my life. And that's when I had that first near-death experience. And that was 2 or 3 weeks prior to going on the Tammy Faye Bakker show.
Well, that brings us to Tammy Faye. She was looking for someone like yourself.
Right.
She was looking for you, actually.
Yeah.
And she found you.
Yeah, she found me.
Tell us a little bit about that first meeting with her.
Well, I met her by satellite 3 minutes before the interview began. And we had like three minutes to talk before that. And I could not see her. I only had an earpiece and a mic and a camera in front of me. I had no monitor. She could see me on that little TV set next to her, but I couldn't see her. So we talked for the first 3 minutes, just chatted, and she was very friendly and loving and supportive, and she told me, this is the Tammy's house party is the Phil Donahue of PTL, so we don't have to talk about Jesus, we talk about issues, you know. And then 3 minutes into it, she started talking about Jesus, so I thought, okay, when in Charlotte. So I went with it, and I tried to tell her about the near-death experience, and she didn't quite let me go down that path that far. But I told her that I had nearly died a few weeks before, and it was more than nearly. And I was brought back from that, knowing that there is nothing to fear in death, and having had this amazing experience of peace and just understanding and totally understanding myself and the world and all of that, and feeling surrounded by love. And there was this brilliant light that these loving shadows were trying to point me towards, and yet it was not quite my time yet. And I was back in my body, and I was pissed because it had been so wonderful. And I've since had 4 more near-death experiences. And every time it's just unbelievable in the peace and the knowing, the understanding of life that you feel in that moment. And you know what? I came away from that. I had been scared to death of dying alone. And I realized that dying alone was not a reality, that even if we didn't have anybody around us, we were surrounded by loving beings. in that moment of death, in that passing. And so that was an incredible moment. And I tried to talk about that with Tammy, but she finally asked me, "Are you scared of dying? Should that happen to you?" And my thought was, should it happen to me? I mean, we're all going to die.
We're all going to die.
Yeah, but I said, no, not after this experience a couple of weeks ago. I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that means there is nothing to fear in death. And she said, "Hallelujah! Only a Christian can know that." And she looked, the way she looked at me, the way I heard her in that moment, I knew that she got it. I think that was the moment that she really got it, that I was a gay Christian. That was a huge moment for her audience.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the time frame of you going on her show.
Sure.
Of course, there was a huge backlash against her and Jim that came a little later. That wasn't really happening at that time, was it? Or was it at the beginnings of that?
No, well, I have been told over and over again by people who were around PTL that was the beginning of the end. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Tammy's positive interview of me, her affirming interview of a gay man with AIDS, incensed Jerry Falwell.
Oh, yeah.
And he decided that was the moment he decided that was when that Jim and Tammy and PTL had to be brought down, and he accomplished it within 18 months or so of that interview. But I'm told that's the straw that broke the camel's back. She got in a lot of trouble for the interview. I mean, she was crucified.
Oh, I know.
But when everything fell down around her, she found that it was the LGBTQ community that was there for her. And she said that often. And she made friends with LGBT people. I've become friends with Jay Bakker, her Jim and Tammy's son. And I love talking with him, and he's a great guy. And he's told me that my interview changed the entire family, and it changed him at 10. Because Tammy started taking him and his sister around to MCC services, to AIDS hospices, to visit people with AIDS. She started taking the kids to gay pride parades, and just educated them that.
Well, wasn't she the grand marshal of a couple of gay pride parades?
Later on, yes, she was. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Now, going back, when you agreed to do the show, did anyone try to talk you out of it?
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. I had, a couple of friends who said, "Oh, you're kidding." I mean, nobody's going to take you seriously if you talk to her, because she had a reputation for being a little crazy among some LGBT people, and people thought that I would ruin my reputation by being on her show. Little did they know.
Yeah. Now, did you have a particular goal going on the show?
Sure.
Obviously, that came to you. What did you hope to accomplish by going on the show? And did you achieve what you were going after going on the show?
I wanted her audience to know that God loves LGBTQ people. And that God loves us just the way we are. And I said to her, Jesus loves me just the way I am. Jesus loves the way I love. And she got very emotional at that moment and said, "This is a very emotional interview for me." And she drew herself together and she said, "Have you ever had a sexual experience with a woman?" And I said, "No, well, I've necked, but no." That wasn't the path that God was leading me on. And she was really accepting of that, and affirming. I wanted her audience to know that God loves us, gay and lesbian people, and transgender people, and queer people. I wanted them to know that it didn't matter what they thought. There are a lot of us gay and lesbian people who believe in God's love for us, who believe that we are, whether we believe in God or not, that we are good people, that we are just fine.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
And was this a live interview at the time?
It was. I insisted that it be live. That was one of the stipulations I made, that it go out live. And so they couldn't edit it to their own purposes, whatever that might be.
Good for you. And how did your life change after the interview?
Well, it didn't change at first. At first, I thought, oh, my God, I wish I'd said that. I wish I hadn't said this. Oh, my God, I could have put that better. And, and all of that. And I went home, and my neighbor, Lucia, and I got together and laughed about it. And I said, oh, my God, I did so badly. I'm so glad nobody I know will ever see it. The best laid plans, right?
Yeah.
But then a year and a half, in summer of 1987, Troy Perry played the interview as the opening of the MCC International General Conference. And in that interview, after playing the interview, the audience stood and cheered. I was sitting there squirming like, oh my God, I'm so bad. And the audience stood up and screamed their approval and just kept applauding. And Troy had me come up to the front and wave at the people, and ever after that, I was suddenly being invited all kinds of churches all over the world and conferences to teach and preach about living with AIDS and having hope in the face of AIDS and all of that. And that's when I picked up my fairy wand and talked about believing in fairies. And everywhere I went, they wanted me to bring the Tammy Bakker interview. And I began to realize the power of what had happened during those 24 minutes. And they not only wanted to see the Tammy Bakker interview in person themselves with that videotape, but they wanted to watch me watching it. And after a while, I began to get really tired of watching it.
And did you and Tammy ever meet?
No, we never did. We exchanged greetings through mutual friends, but I never did get the chance to meet her. So I regret that very much. I'm so glad that I got to meet her son and become friends with Jay.
And what about Jim J. Bullock, who she also worked with?
Oh, yes. Oh, she loved him. And she had a talk show with him.
That's right.
And I've never met Jim J. Bullock either, but he certainly had a wonderful time with Tammy and she with him. Yeah.
So now this motion picture is coming out, I think on September 17th. Is that the release date?
Yes.
How did they contact you to let you know about the film? Did they need your permission to?
No. I did not know about the film until it had already been filmed. It was in post-production. And Jay Bakker found me on Instagram and invited me to be on his podcast, Loosen the Bible Belt. And so we talked, and in the course of the interview, he told me about this movie that was coming up with Jessica Chastain playing his mother, and that my interview with his mother was central to the film. It was a major turning point in the film. And I had no idea they were doing this. And so I wrote to the Searchlight Pictures and said, hey, this is the guy with AIDS that she interviewed. I'm still alive, And the publicist for the film wrote me back, and we've been in touch ever since. And I'm going to the premiere in New York City and the red carpet, and walk the red carpet with the stars. And it's amazing. I saw the film a few weeks ago. It's really good.
Wow.
It's really good. Jay liked it too. He said there are some flaws, but it's the first time his parents have really been dealt with as real human beings and not just caricatures or not just cartoon characters.
It's interesting. She's been portrayed by Bernadette Peters.
Yes.
And now Jessica Chastain. And, Kristen Chenoweth wants to do a Broadway musical about her. What do you think it is about Tammy Faye Bakker that still has this hold on us, and especially the LGBTQ community?
Well, I think partly it's the fact that she bridged that huge divide between the conservative Christian community and the LGBTQ community. I think that a lot of LGBTQ people really loved the way that she kept coming back. You know, Jerry Falwell brought them down, but she kept coming back. And she had all these comebacks like Judy Garland, and she came back stronger every time. And even as she approached her own death, which we saw on, I mean, not her death, but it was a couple days before on Larry King. She had a rough go of it with the cancer that
Yes,
she
absolutely.
But she prevailed through it all. She had faith through it all, and I think that's really appealing to LGBT people because we face such challenges in our lives, and to see somebody rise up above those challenges and thrive and insist. She insisted on being who she was. I think that's another thing that galvanized LGBT people. She insisted on wearing that makeup, even though people made fun of her about it. She insisted that this was who she was and how she wanted to be. And so I think that had a lot to do. I mean, not just the makeup, but the whole persona of strength in the face of adversity really appeals to us.
Now, you've shared your wand with us, but that's not your original. Your
No.
original is at the Smithsonian. How did your wand end up at the Smithsonian?
Well, Troy Perry was invited to donate to the Smithsonian artifacts and documents from the history of the Metropolitan Community Churches. And they asked him if he knew anybody in AIDS ministry who could donate artifacts related to AIDS ministry. And he said, "Do I know somebody?" Reverend Steve Pieters, yes. He was the director of AIDS ministry for my denomination. So he asked me to pack a big box full of documents and artifacts and things like that. And at the last minute, I saw my fairy wand on the shelf and I thought, should I put that in? No, this is really important. This is very important to me. But then I thought, do I want it to be gathering dust on my shelf or in the Smithsonian? Hello. Into the box it went, and the Smithsonian loved it. The curators there thought that was the best, that it kind of symbolized the way that the LGBTQ community survived all that happened to us during the worst of the AIDS years.
Absolutely. Well, I've got a list of questions that I want to ask you that are just generic questions that I put together that are not specific at you, but just to give us a little bit deeper into you. And the first question is, what is the one thing in life that you care most about?
Ooh, wow. I guess it's getting the message out that God loves us just the way we are. I think that's what I care most about. Is getting LGBTQIA people to believe in themselves and believe in themselves enough to be the people that they were created to be. That's and great. Not anybody else.
That's wonderful. And what is the thing that gives you the most joy in the world?
Singing. I love to sing. I love musicals. I love being a part of the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles. I've been a singer with the Gay Men's Chorus since 1994, and it's just, I love it.
That's great. In what way are you the most judgmental?
Ooh, wow, that's a good question. I guess I'm judgmental of stupidity and bigotry. I'm judgmental of people who just aren't with it in terms of getting with the program, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what do you most look forward to and dread about getting older?
Well, I look at getting older as a great triumph first of all. I wasn't supposed to see 33. So 69 feels damn good.
Excuse me, I think you were supposed to look forward to
But I love being 69, and I love the wisdom that's what I love about it is I get to be a tribal elder. You know, and that's a wonderful thing to be. I'm so glad I got to this age to see that and to experience that. And the thing that I dread is the possibility of losing my mind to dementia of one sort or another. I dread the increasing frailty of the human body. I've been through it once or twice in my life already, and it's no fun to be sick. It's no fun to be frail. And I had to learn to walk all over again after one long, hard hospitalization. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I never want to have to, I don't know. It's just, that's the part of growing old that I don't look forward to.
Wow. What was the biggest thing that you ever got away with?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. The biggest thing I ever got away with, I don't know, surviving AIDS.
Great answer. Good answer. Where was the farthest from home that you have ever felt?
That I've ever felt? Oh, well, my parents put me in a boarding school in France, in the French Alps, when I was 14. And I felt further away from home then than I ever felt before or since, except maybe when I was in the hospital in 2012 with pancreatitis and a bunch of other diseases. And I was near death again. And I felt, I had wonderful friends around me, but there were times when they couldn't be there, and I was all alone in my hospital room, and I felt desperately alone, and I felt the absence of God at times, which I think is part of the God experience. Sometimes God lets us feel their absence so that we can feel their presence more deeply.
Wow. And where was and actually, when do you feel the closest to home?
When do I feel closest to home? Well, again, it goes back to singing and singing. When I sing hymns at church, when we're able to go to church, when I sing hymns, I belt them out like show tunes. And I just feel so close to God when I get to do that. And, that's when I feel closest to home, I guess. Yeah.
That's
Good
great.
question.
And when were you the happiest to come home?
Oh, well, I was always happy to go home after my parents put me in boarding camps or boarding school. I was just such a relief to be home. And after that experience in 2012, when I thought I was never going to get to sing again because I was going to die in the hospital, when I got to get back on the stage with the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles and perform, that was a triumph and a joy that the likes of which I'd never experienced before.
Wow. And my last question for you, what is the worst trouble that you've ever gotten yourself into?
Well, maybe one of the, there were certain drunken nights that
you can share those with me after the show.
Yeah, right. The most trouble, I don't know. I'm a pretty good boy. I grew up feeling like I had to be the best little boy in the world to make up for this horrible thing about me that I didn't want anyone to know. So I'm still a really good little boy and a big boy. And, I've gotten tickets that I was like really ashamed of getting. there was one night when I didn't have enough alcohol with me, when I stumbled to the liquor store nearby, and I couldn't. I was so drunk. I had run out of alcohol, and I was so drunk that I couldn't even say vodka. I pointed to the bottle, and the cashier gave it to me with the look of scorn on his face that I never want to see again.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to tell you, I admire you so much.
Oh.
And, it took us a while to get here today, but we made it happen.
We did indeed.
So, and for me, it was well worth the wait. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank everybody who tuned in today. I don't take for granted that you could have been anywhere else for the past hour. The fact that you chose to spend it with us, and the fact that you were patient enough to wait to get here.
Oh, well.
To me. So, first of all, I want to thank you for being here. If this was your first time here today, my hope is that you will all subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates right here on YouTube. As I said, my show is all about celebrating artists of all kinds from all walks of life. Take the time to check out the other artists that I've celebrated in the past and those that are coming up. I also end every show. Hit the like button if you like today's show. Leave a comment. That helps with the ranking of this show. And tell your friends about this. It's all about building the audience. Yeah. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the second name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And let that person know what they mean to you. As a dear friend of mine says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And you never know what somebody else is going through right now. But I always say, if you're going to go out on a boat, make sure that you bring a skipper along. Steve, I am going to leave the screen, and I'm going to give you the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish that we had said, or any message that you want to put out to anyone who's listening today. I want to thank you for the gifts that you've given to the world and that you're going to continue to give. And once you say the final word, I have a request. I heard about a parody that you sing from Pirates of Penzance, and I would love for you to leave us with that today. Do you mind?
Sure, that's fine.
And that's going to be our closing today. Okay. And thank you all. And I hope that you'll stay in touch. Will you do that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
You know, the message I think I'd like to leave you with is a Native American saying, the quality of life is not measured by the length of life, but by the fullness with which we enter into each present moment. So in this moment, choose to feel joy and choose to feel life and be alive. And the song that I sing, that I wrote the lyrics to many years ago, goes like this. I am the very model of a medical anomaly. I've had KS, lymphoma, hepatitis, thrush, and CMV, bacterial pneumonia, and adrenal insufficiency. All this and more because I caught a virus that's called HIV. And then I took an antiviral just like chemotherapy. It made me sick. My hair fell out. I suffered neurologically. But hey, it worked. It stopped all of the HIV activity. My lymphoma's in remission, and there is no more KS to see. Lymphoma's in remission, and there is no more KS to see. Lymphoma's in remission, and there is no more KS to see. Lymphoma's in remission, and there is no more KS to see. Now, many years have passed, and I'm as healthy as a horse can be. It's certainly a miracle for anyone with faith to see. But it's still in journals medical and science and oncology. I am the very model of a medical anomaly.